What if the most powerful military in the world didn't always win its wars? It sounds unlikely, almost impossible, because for decades, the United States has been seen as one of the most dominant forces in modern history. Its military presence spans the globe, its technology leads the world, and its influence reaches far beyond its borders. But history tells a more complicated story, a story where power does not always guarantee success. To understand this, we need to ask a simple question. What does it actually mean to win a war? Is it about winning battles, or controlling territory, or achieving political goals? Because in many cases, these things don't always align. A country can win battles, but fail to achieve its objectives. And sometimes, a war ends without a clear winner at all. Let's take a closer look at some of the most important conflicts involving the United States. Some are widely considered victories, like World War II, a global conflict with clear objectives and a clear outcome. Another example is the Gulf War, a short, decisive operation with clearly defined goals and rapid success. But not every conflict fits this pattern. Take the Korean War. It did not end in total victory, but it was not a clear defeat either. Instead, it ended in a kind of balance. And then there are wars that became far more complex over time, like the Vietnam War, where military strength did not lead to long-term success, or the war in Afghanistan, where initial success gradually turned into a long and difficult conflict. So, did the United States win more wars than it lost? The answer depends on how you measure it. If you focus on short-term results, the answer might seem clear. But if you look at long-term outcomes, the picture becomes much more complicated. Some wars were victories, some were incomplete, and some did not achieve their original goals. And this reveals something important. Even the most powerful nations have limits. Geography matters, local resistance matters, political goals matter, and time may matter more than anything else. Because the longer a conflict lasts, the more unpredictable it becomes. And this brings us to a modern question. If a conflict were to happen between the United States and Iran, what would actually decide the outcome? Would it be military strength alone, or something deeper, something more complex? Because history suggests the answer is never as simple as it first appears.
When people imagine a conflict between the United States and Iran, they often picture a simple outcome, a stronger military defeating a weaker one. It's an idea that feels logical. Power wins, strength dominates, technology decides everything. But modern conflicts are rarely that simple. To understand why, we have to look beyond numbers, beyond weapons, beyond headlines. On paper, the United States has one of the most advanced military forces in the world. Its capabilities are global. It can project power across continents through air, sea, and advanced intelligence systems. This kind of strength matters in direct confrontation. It allows for speed, precision, and coordination on a large scale. But even this level of power has limits, because war is not fought on paper. It is fought in real places, with real conditions and real constraints. Now consider Iran, a country shaped by geography, mountain ranges, elevated terrain, narrow access routes. These are not just physical features, they are strategic factors. In difficult terrain, movement slows down, large operations become more complex, supply lines become harder to maintain, and control becomes more difficult over time. But geography is only part of the equation. There is also the question of how a conflict is fought.
Modern conflicts do not always follow traditional patterns. They are not always clear, direct, or predictable. Sometimes they involve indirect pressure, long-term resistance, and strategies designed to avoid direct confrontation. In these situations, the objective is not always to win quickly. Sometimes the objective is to extend the conflict, to increase the cost, and to make success more difficult to achieve. This changes everything. There is also a regional dimension. The Middle East is not isolated. It is a region where multiple interests overlap. And within this environment, one country plays a particularly important role: Israel. The relationship between the United States and Israel has developed over decades. It includes security cooperation, strategic alignment, and shared regional concerns. This does not mean every decision is identical, but it does mean their strategies are often connected. Now consider what this means in a broader context. If a conflict were to emerge involving Iran, it would not exist in isolation, because actions in one part of the region can influence others, and when multiple actors are involved, the situation becomes layered. Decisions are no longer just between two countries, they become regional, and sometimes even global. In such an environment, even small changes can have wide-reaching effects. A single decision can reshape the dynamics of the entire region, and this creates strategic uncertainty, where outcomes are not only difficult to control, but difficult to predict. So if a conflict were ever to happen, it would not be decided by one factor alone, not just military strength, but geography, strategy, time, objectives, and adaptation. Because in modern geopolitics, strength can shape the beginning, but it does not always decide the ending. And this leads to an even deeper question. If power alone is not enough, then what truly determines the outcome of a war? To answer that, we have to look at history.
If we want to understand modern conflicts, we need to look at patterns from the past, because history does not always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And in those patterns, we can see how geography and strategy interact over time. Let's look at one of the most studied examples, the Vietnam War. At the time, the United States had significant advantages: advanced military technology, air power, and global logistical capabilities. On paper, these advantages suggested a clear outcome, but the reality was more complex. The terrain in Vietnam played a major role: dense forests, limited visibility, difficult movement across regions. These conditions affected how operations were conducted. Local forces adapted to the environment, using it to their advantage, avoiding direct confrontation when necessary. Instead of meeting strength with strength, they focused on endurance, flexibility, and long-term resistance. Over time, the conflict extended, becoming more complex and harder to resolve. This shows something important. Military strength alone does not guarantee long-term success. Now compare this with another conflict, the war in Afghanistan. Again, initial success was achieved early. Objectives were met quickly in the beginning stages, but maintaining stability proved to be a different challenge. The geography of the region played a significant role once again. Mountainous terrain, remote areas, limited access routes. These conditions made sustained operations more complex. Supply lines had to cover long distances, coordination became more difficult, and local dynamics continued to evolve over time. As years passed, the nature of the mission began to shift. What started as a focused objective gradually became a long-term engagement. And this reveals a consistent pattern. Short-term outcomes can be achieved through strength, but long-term outcomes depend on additional factors:
adaptation, strategy, local understanding, and time. Because the longer a conflict lasts, the more variables are introduced. Public opinion can change, costs can increase, objectives can evolve, and decisions become more complex. So when we study these conflicts together, a pattern begins to emerge. Success in modern conflicts is not defined by a single moment. It is defined by the ability to sustain outcomes over time. And that requires more than force. It requires strategy that can adapt to changing conditions. This is why geography matters so much, because geography shapes movement, shapes access, shapes communication, and ultimately shapes decisions. When combined with time, these factors influence how conflicts unfold. And this brings us closer to understanding modern geopolitics, not as isolated events, but as connected systems, where decisions in one region can influence outcomes in another, and where outcomes are rarely immediate, they are gradual, complex, and often unpredictable. So when we look at history, we don't just see wars, we see patterns, we see strategies, and we see how geography continues to shape decisions, even today.
Up to this point, we have looked at geography, strategy, and historical patterns. But modern geopolitics introduces an even broader perspective. Because today, conflicts are not only local, they are interconnected. Economic systems, trade routes, alliances, and communication networks all play a role. And this means that a change in one region can create ripple effects elsewhere. In the Middle East, this interconnected nature becomes especially visible. Multiple countries, multiple interests, and overlapping strategic goals, including relationships involving the United States, Iran, and regional partners such as Israel. Each of these actors operates within its own objectives, but those objectives often intersect. This creates a complex environment, where decisions are rarely isolated. They are part of a larger system. A system influenced by geography, history, and long-term strategy. In such an environment, outcomes are shaped not by a single factor, but by the interaction of many factors combined. Military capability, geographic constraints, political objectives, time horizons, and the ability to adapt. All of these elements work together, and when they interact, the result is rarely predictable in advance. This is why modern conflicts are often described as multidimensional. They are not just about winning or losing. They are about influence, stability, positioning, and long-term balance. Because in today's world, power is not only measured by direct control. It is also measured by reach, by access, and by the ability to shape outcomes indirectly. And geography continues to play a central role in this process. Mountains, rivers, distances, and borders still influence how decisions are made. Even in a highly connected world, physical space still matters, because it defines movement, limits access, and creates natural constraints. So while technology has changed the way power operates, it has not removed the importance of geography. Instead, it has made it more relevant in new ways. Because now, understanding geography is not just about maps. It is about strategy, about planning, and about anticipating outcomes in a complex global system. And as global interactions continue to evolve, these factors will remain a key part of how nations think, decide, and act, not just in moments of conflict, but in everyday strategy, shaping the present and influencing the future. Because in today's world, Winning is not always about control. Sometimes it's about influence.